Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Okay. Well, thank you, Andrew. My name is Robert Spirito, and I am very excited to be up here. I have the great honor to speak with our guests this evening. Sorry about the note cards, but I just want to point out that's how excited I am. I have to keep myself on track this evening. He was a fighter pilot, a test pilot, retired brigadier general from the United States Air Force, an astronaut, and the biggest reason we have him tonight is he's also a moonwalker. He was the 10th man to walk on the moon, and he's the youngest man to ever walk on the moon. Please welcome our guest, Mr. Charlie Duke. Thank you.
Let's stand up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So Charlie, I have to let you in on a little secret. This entire event was because I convinced Zeiss that we needed to have a party just so I would have the opportunity to meet you. So that's why we're here. So thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Appreciate it. Right? Thank you, Dr. Metz, for inviting me. It's good to be here with everybody. Hope you enjoy our presentation about, gee whiz, what it was like on the moon. And if anybody's here that doesn't believe we walked on the moon, I'll guarantee you we did it. If we faked it, why did we fake it 9 times?
Exactly. But I also have another confession. Yeah. It's not the first time I met an astronaut. These are some of your pictures, right? This is you with the original 19.
Yeah.
This is you for Apollo 16. But
that's a long time ago.
wasn't that long. But it's not the first time I ever met an astronaut. So I want to point out, I'll zoom in for you. Just want to point out my parents were not aware of Zeiss lenses at the time. But you could see that it was not a fun first encounter for me with an astronaut. No. However, it ended very well. So I'm very happy, and I think tonight's going to go well. Good. So thank you. Somebody odd. Thank you. All right. So we've all seen the Hollywood movies that depict, whether it's The Right Stuff or any of a number of movies that depict the training it takes to become an astronaut. So I have this image here that's of one of the training exercises you went through. But do you have a story or anything interesting you'd like to talk about with your training becoming an astronaut?
Well, this is a picture of us in a zero gravity airplane that we call the Vomit Comet because it was over the top at 0G, 2.5 G pull up, over the top, and your stomach was going up and down. And so this is just the fun part. We just first started. The real training started when we got our spacesuit on and we put a car in there. And so with all of my gear on down here, I weighed 363 pounds. Well, if you pull up at 2.5 times gravity, that's a lot of weight, over 900 pounds. And so as you were in this thing and you were getting ready, the light would start flashing and you knew he was going to start a pull-up, and these two guys would slam you to the floor. And so you were spread eagle on the floor so you could stand the weight. And then about 30 seconds later, as you started up, the light had come on again, and they'd pull you up like that, and your elbows went that way, and then they went this way. And so it's very difficult to keep everything down in this thing. And in fact, we had a photographer that was taking our pictures, and on the first parabola, he threw up. And so he had a bag in one hand and his camera in the other hand. It was a very good training, though. We enjoyed those flights.
That's awesome. That's excellent. Okay. So during the Apollo era, you served in a number of different roles, whether it was backup pilot, but one of the most memorable roles you had was serving as Capcom. And specifically, you were Capcom for Apollo 11. So if I could just set it up for a moment. I know you've heard the story, but I'd like to set it up for a moment for everybody. So it's July 20th, 1969. It's a little after 4 p.m. Eastern time. An estimated 600 million people are watching around the world. And you are there, basically front row, as far as the world is concerned, listening to Neil and Buzz as they're about to land. Let me share with everybody a little bit of what that experience was like for the rest of us.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward, 5%. How many bites? 75 feet, that's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. Good. 40 feet down 2.5. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. Down a half. 30 seconds forward. Just picking up some dust. Got the shadow up there. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. Very smooth touchdown.
You know, Robert, thank you.
Yeah, so today we know that they successfully landed, but it's obvious from your reaction, wiping your brow, it seemed like it might have been nervous and tense. Can you let us in a little bit about what was going on through your mind and in the control room?
Well, the control room during the descent, it got quieter and quieter and quieter because we were having all these problems. First we had communication problems. Then we had computer problems, and the computer was overloaded. By the way, the Apollo computer had 80K memory. So, you know, my mobile phone has 800,000 times the memory of an Apollo computer. So anyway, but it kept working, and so we continued the descent. And then about 7,000 feet above the moon, Neil pitches over and sees the surface, and we had him targeted into the right position. So he had to fly over that position, and so what that does is burn up all your gas. And so he's now minimum fuel. And so we had to call 60 seconds. That meant he had 60 seconds to land, and you could hear that in the transcript. And then I called 30 seconds. And he still wasn't on the ground. 17 seconds later, he lands. And we had engine stop, contact, and we didn't see it like you saw here. We just listening to it. So the tension was out of sight in mission control. Very quiet. I'd never heard it I felt it like that. And so after he touched down, he came back very calmly. Said, Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. Well, I was so excited, I couldn't even say Tranquility. It came out twang, or something like that. And so I corrected myself. And what I said at the end, I said, Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue, we're breathing again. And that's true. We all relieved. The guy on my left is Jim Lovell, and just beyond him is Fred Hayes. They were the backup crew, and so they were sitting in mission control with me. And so we pulled it off the very first attempt, and a great relief.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. By the way, let me say, when the next call from Mission Control would have been Eagle abort. And I am convinced, had Mission Control made that call, Eagle abort, there would have been dead silence on the other end. And it would have finally, they said, Armstrong would have said, "Say again, Houston, we didn't read you." He was going to land that machine, whether he was out of gas or not. He was going to land it, and he did.
That's great. Thank you. So actually, speaking of Jim Lovell, that was a nice segue a moment ago. This is the original prime crew for Apollo 13.
Right.
And we all know the story of Apollo 13, but prior to launch, there was something specific that happened that you were a part of that affected one of the crew members.
This was my most infamous moment. About a week before launch, I caught the measles. Of course, the NASA doctors were stunned. Kids get the measles. What's an astronaut doing with the measles? And so they had to test everybody to make sure everybody had the measles. Well, the guy in the center there is T.K. Mattingly, who was supposed to go on Apollo 13, but he had never had the measles. So they took him off the flight and substituted Jack Schweikert, and it ended up Mattingly and I flew together on Apollo 16 2 years later.
Yep.
So there we are.
Yep. So as fate would have it, Ken Mattingly wound up on your mission.
Right.
And so I want to kind of turn to that now, right? So it's April 16th, 1972. You're sitting on the launch pad. You're about to be launched in space. You've done 6 years of training at this point. What do you do that day? How do you mentally prepare? What's going through your mind?
Well, the first thing is before liftoff, we had a nice breakfast, and then we had to suit up. And we got suited up so that we were breathing pure oxygen for 3 hours to scrub all the nitrogen from your body. We got on board, they strapped us in, and we just sit there looking at our instrument panel. In Apollo, the windows were covered over at that point. You couldn't see outside. So we were just, after 2 years of, really 2 years of training on this mission, the idea was, let's go, let's keep counting, please keep counting. And sure enough, right on the second, they lit the engines and off we went. So it was a great relief when we started up. And but the Saturn is 363 feet tall, and it weighed 6.5 million pounds at this point. And the vibration from side to side was intense. And I don't remember anybody telling me it was supposed to vibrate like that. So I got a little nervous, but John Young was, we're go, Houston, and Mission Control, you're go. And so I said, okay, I'm riding along. They said, we're okay. But my heartbeat was really, I was really excited. And so when I got back, I asked the flight surgeon who was monitoring our heartbeat. I said, what was my heartbeat? He said, when you lifted off, you were going, your heart was 144 per minute. And I said, wow, I was really excited. I said, well, how about John Young, the commander on the left? What was his heartbeat? Oh, his was 70. so he was a cool one.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. That's awesome. All right, so now we'll skip forward a couple of days, just 4 days later. So it's April 20th, and you're preparing the LEM. You're going through the procedure to check the LEM. You're coming around the moon one last time before your descent, and you're hit with a series of delays.
Yeah.
And so you actually experienced 6 hours of delays after you were in the LEM, waiting to land on the moon.
Yeah.
So again, what is going through your mind at that point to have traveled that far?
Well, your description is correct. We were 1 hour before landing. And as we came around the front side before this, you could look down and there was your landing spot 8 miles beneath you. And you could see it. And then on the backside, an hour before we were to land, Mattingly and the other spacecraft said, there's something wrong with this engine. And, well, what is it, Ken? And he told John, and John said, well, don't burn. When John said that, we were going to abort that landing on the next rev. And so we'd come 250,000 miles, 8 miles beneath us, and we're ready, and they're about ready to tell us to come home. So you can imagine we were very disappointed. But Mission Control is the unsung heroes of Apollo, and they saved the day on Apollo 13, Apollo 11, on every mission. Something came up where they had to solve the problem. And so they solved the problem. They couldn't fix the problem, but they gave us a workaround. And so 6 hours later, we landed on the moon.
That's great.
Same.
That's great. So that happened on April 20th, but it was the next day, April 21st.
Yeah.
When so you already landed on April 20th, but you weren't allowed to go out yet. But on April 21st, you got to finally leave the lunar module and experience what would become 20-hour, three different moonwalks for a total of 20 hours and 14 minutes. But what was it like the very first step? I think that's always what people want to know.
Well, the lunar module pilot, which was my job on the very first step, you didn't have a speech to make like the commander and Neil Armstrong. So I hit the moon and I was in wonder, I was in awe, I was excited. It was this tremendous adventure. You're standing there on the moon, the bright reflection of the lunar surface. So you had 2 sun visors down so you could see something because it was so bright. You looked up and it was just the blackness of space. When the sun's shining, which was all the time on the moon, you don't see the stars. You just look up and you see blackness of space. Where we stood on the moon, the Earth was directly overhead. And so in an Apollo spacesuit, you look up and you look at the top of your helmet. So I can't say that I actually saw the Earth from the moon because it was directly overhead.
Okay.
But, and so we felt right at home though. It wasn't, you didn't have a sense of danger, no evil feeling. It was not like some of the Hollywood movies about, but we had to be very careful. This crater's about 40 feet deep. And if we slid into that crater, you could not get out.
Right.
So we had to give those wide bursts. And you can see the footprints. Everywhere we walked, we left your footprints. So everywhere we drove, we left our tracks. So you never worried about getting lost. All you had to do is turn around and follow your tracks back. It was exciting being on the moon. I mean, we were out there over 20 hours, and we never got tired of seeing the wonder of the moon. And we didn't want to come back. We pleaded two more hours, but they wouldn't give it to us.
They wouldn't let you.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you got to drive on the moon, and in fact, you got to drive about 17 miles on the moon.
Yeah.
And what was this like? What does this ride feel like?
Well, I was not the driver. John Young drove. I was the navigator. But we were strapped in, and you can see the moon is rough. And so as you, if you watch this, I'm taking this movie camera scene of the rover underway, and you can see how rough the moon is, and it bounces. The car only weighed 80 pounds up on the moon. So the independent suspension of it gave it really a bouncy ride. So we had a seat belt that we buckled up in so that we wouldn't get thrown out. It never felt like it was going to roll over, but it was like on ice all the time, it seemed like. And we did spin out a couple of times. We ended up driving about 17 miles. We set the moon speed record along with Apollo 17, which was 17 miles an hour. No, 11 miles an hour. And watch this now as he hits, the whole thing's almost, front end's off the ground almost. It was a great car though, Robert, and it was really reliable, and it revolutionized lunar exploration.
It's amazing footage, and I believe you shared with me also that this is the only time footage was taken from outside the vehicle of the rover.
That's right. That little sync which you just saw is the only sequence that mission control, all the engineers could see of the whole vehicle.
That's great. Okay. So, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, as you heard, we at Zeiss, obviously, we're very proud of the role that that our optics has played in documenting space travel. But in addition to that, our lenses have been used for experiments and other things, including UV photography, which you did on the moon. And right now, for Zeiss, we're doing a lot to educate consumers and eye care professionals about UV protection in their eyewear. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned using this camera on the moon?
Well, John put up the camera, and we had a series of positions that we had to turn to focus on different parts of the solar system. This is a bow wave of the Earth, as you see the UV colors that appear as Earth moves through space. It creates this aurora around it in something we can't see with our eyes. Yeah. So this camera had a tremendous effect on some of the deep space science. This was before Hubble telescope and stuff like that. And we were the only flight that had this naval observatory camera with a Zeiss lens. I might add also we had each of us had a Hasselblad with a Zeiss lens, and I had a 500-meter lens that we used to take pictures of distant objects. And that one was not on your bracket on your suit. I had to hold it up like this, and the cameras had no viewfinders. So the way we got in our spacesuits, and we practice and practice and practice. So you stood there in your spacesuit to take a picture, you like this, like that, turn this way, turn that way, and we got really good. Hardly ever missed a photograph that we had to take. Yeah,
and we've all benefited from that. Yeah. You know, many of the photographs here, you know, are a test to that.
You can see them here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you. While you were on the moon, you and John Young, you collected about 213 pounds of rocks and soil, but you also left something behind, something very personal. Yeah. Would you like to share that story with us?
Yeah. This is a picture of my family. We have 2 sons, now grown men, of course, and those guys have given us 9 grandchildren. And so Charles is on the left, named after me. Tom is in the red shirt, and forgive us for the costumes, but that's the way the people dressed back in 1972. And so to get the family involved, I said, everybody want to go to the moon with Dad? They said, yeah, that'd be great. So I said, well, we'll have to take a picture. So we had a picture taken in our backyard. I got permission to take it from our boss, Dick Slayton, and we had it, and I put it in some plastic, and so I dropped the picture on the moon, took my camera and bent over and took a picture of it. Now, the temperature on the moon at this point was 230 degrees Fahrenheit, wow. The surface. So you can imagine a plastic wrapped photo, what it's going to happen to it. But you won't be able to recognize it today, but that picture is still there. Wow. On the moon. It's the only one of a family taken.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And on the back of the photograph, we had written, "This is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke, who landed on the moon in April 1972," and we all signed it.
That's great.
This is a great. In fact, there's a documentary coming out on that film this summer.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, Lunar Tribute it's called.
Lunar Tribute. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So recently, you were honored by the International Olympic Committee for something that happened during your mission. Yeah. So will you share that experience, that story with us?
Well, in every Apollo flight, at the ends, the crew on the moon wanted to do something special. So Alan Shepard played golf, and on Apollo 14. Apollo 15, Dave Scott had a hammer and a feather that he dropped, and they hit the ground at the same time. Okay. So 72 was an Olympic year, and we were going to do the Moon Olympics. And so we had the high jump was our first event. And as I said earlier, I weighed 363 pounds down here. Up on the moon, I weighed 60 pounds. So we started to bounce like this. And when I did, I jumped up. And when I did, I straightened up. And the backpack weighed as much as I did. So over, I went backwards. And that was the only time in the whole mission where I was fearful, because if that backpack breaks, I'm dead. Yeah. And so I rolled right and broke my fall, flat on my back. John Young came over and says, that wasn't very smart, Charlie. And I said, yeah, help me up. So he helped me up, and you could hear the pumps running. You could feel the oxygen flow. The pressure was good. And so I was okay. So what this award was, almost, well, as last December, the president of the IOC gave Apollo 16 the Spirit of the Olympics Award. This is the President's Award. That's great. So we took the Spirit of the Olympics.
That's amazing. Okay, so that was the final moments of your EVA on your the lunar landing. So let's fast forward a couple more days. So it's April 27th, 1972. You're re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and you're going to experience splashdown. Can you tell us a little bit of what is that like as you're going through that?
Well, when we hit the atmosphere, we were going over 26,000 miles an hour. And we had cold soaked the inside of the spacecraft, so it was down about 60 degrees inside. And as we hit the atmosphere, you're going in with your back towards the velocity vector, and you look out the window and you can start to see these flashes going off, which is the ionized gas. Okay. And as we plunged into the atmosphere, we were decelerating at 7.5 times gravity, being pushed back into the seats. And in Apollo, you come in so shallow that you had to be very careful, because if you hit and let it bounce off or skip out, you were lost.
Oh, sure.
So as you came in, we were timing, taking photographs, and then as at the right time, we rolled over, inverted, and came back in. So it was smooth. It wasn't rocky or anything, but it's like being inside of a big furnace. Wow. It was spectacular. And then at about 10,000 feet above the ocean, the parachutes come out, and so that's what you see.
Wow, that is great.
It was not splashdown, though. It was crash down.
Crash down?
The ocean was really rough, and we hit flat, and my head went back, and I had I wasn't unconscious, but I had these stars in my eyes, and my job was, when we hit the water, was to push in a circuit breaker next to my right leg so that he could jettison the parachutes on the left side. Well, it took me a while to get that circuit breaker in, and by then the parachute on the left had flipped us over upside down. Oh. So we were upside down, hanging in the straps. Wow. The hatch was underwater, the windows underwater, so you got to get it righted up before you get out. And so we did, with some balloons, and that was it. The Navy picked us up, and mission complete.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Wow.
It was really an honor and a humbling experience to be picked for one of those missions, Robert. And when I got, it's been said a lot, I was the youngest guy on the moon. Well, that was by 4 months. Now it's been, for us, 47 years since next month. And at 83, I'm still the youngest guy on the moon.
You are. So I have one final question,
Yeah.
which intrigues me immensely. So although it's been a number of years, couple of years, since you had your space mission, you went to the moon, you're still actively involved as an astronaut consultant with the Back to Space organization, whose mission is to inspire the next generation. Why is it so important to go back to the moon and further?
Well, I think space exploration catches the imagination and the spirit of the human race. And what's going to be really important, I think, is the continuation of what we call private enterprise. There's 3 or 4 companies, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Boeing, and several others. And I think what's going to eventually happen, NASA's going to abandon near space to those guys, and we're going to deep space, back to the moon. And on the moon, we can build a habitation module, we can have a science base, similar to Antarctica today, and shuttle crews back and forth, but have a permanent residence on moon where we develop the systems and the procedures and everything so that eventually we can go to Mars. But when you go to Mars, you're on your own. There's no resupply, there's nothing. So everything's got to work. And so if you have a problem, you have to be able to fix it, repair it, or work around it. So all of that experience we get from being back on the moon is going to pay big dividends when we get on the way to Mars.
Awesome. Excellent. Excellent. Well,
I want to, first off, my wife is here, and
yes.
We've been married almost 56 years. And in a training for Apollo, we lived in Houston, but all the training was in Florida or otherwise. And so she ran the house. She was in charge of everything, building the house
yes,
even.
Yes.
So I owe you a great debt, darling. Thank you.
Well, this truly has been an incredible experience for me to have the opportunity to speak with you. I also wanted to thank your wife, Dorothy, because through your book, hearing the entire story has been amazing, and getting to meet you is just, I'm over the moon, right? So thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Enjoy the evening. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.